Hi, everyone. Welcome to Friday Dye Date. I'm so glad to have you here. Today, we're going to have a big adventure with a special color, and we're going to play with the formula of it. If everybody can shut off their video, that's super helpful. Thank you. So before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about how this dye show happens and who I am. I'm Wanda Kerr. I have a business called Wanda Works, and I also own the Magic Carpet Dye Company. I love color. It's sort of my specialty, and I have several ways I like to bring information to you about color. One is the Welcome Mat. That's my online teaching studio, and every week we do things to advance your knowledge about color, and this is just one of them, and we happen to invite you to come and participate. The other thing I mentioned, my overarching business is Wanda Works, and I just got a new Wanda Rosa. That's what I call my studios, and it's at 606 Burford Street in Wyerton. If you in Ontario, in Canada, if you want to come by, all you have to do is just contact me, and we'll make an appointment. But I do have classes the first and third Thursday of every week, and every Sunday you can come and be with me in my studio for a donation from 2 to 4, and I always make amazing baking for you too. So we also have aunties that help support this show. And this week I'm thanking Michelle Wass and Catherine Budrick. And without them, I can't bring you this show. So if you want to join the people who make a small donation and appreciation, please go ahead. All right. So today we're going to talk about formulas. Now, they are the mothership of dyeing. They're how we get our colors. I'm going to turn my heat down a little bit here. They're how we get our colors. They're how we get our values. It's how we make things bright or dull in our rugs, warm or cool. And we really need to know that a formula is somewhat like a story we might read. It has information in there for us. So we're going to look at this formula today. It's from a collection on the Welcome Mat. I probably have thousands by now formulas on the Welcome Mat for you to peruse and use. And sometimes I put them in collections. This was from January 13th, 2018. And it was just a collection of colors of things I was seeing after Christmas that I still had out and didn't want to put away, like an old pomegranate, a beeswax ornament, some cedar that I had cut, and I also had a couple of ribbons, and I had a golden sort of pear decoration I didn't put away. So all of those colors belong to this collection, but of course they're wonderfully useful outside of it. So this is called Cedar Tips. And this is what it looks like from the collection, and here's the measurements for it, the formula for it. 1/16 of moss green. This is all Magic Carpet dyes, of course. 1/128 of chocolate brown, and 1/32 teaspoon of brilliant. Now, recently, in the last couple of years, we had to change our brilliant dye, and it's just a little bit more like its namesake. It's just a little bit more brilliant. And so this is it dyed up, and it's quite lovely. But now I want to play with that formula because it has wonderful information for us that we can change this into something different. So I decided to make it lighter. And here it is lighter. I better get this guy back here so we can compare. So this is it divided by 4. And every time we divide it, it takes it down a single value. So now I've got this nice related color. It hasn't all taken up yet because I didn't add acid. I want to talk about that in a minute. That you can use together or apart, but I just want to show you every formula we can play with. So this is divided by 4, and those measurements, if you don't like math, are 1/32 of moss, 1/1024 of chocolate brown. You can use toothpick measures. If you know me, you know I like those. So I put my dyes away. I'll put it in the notes for class. And then 1/128 of brilliant. I'm just looking around. Oh, here it is here. I really do want to tell you how much that is on a damp round toothpick. I'm just gonna get this out of here. So I have this little chart that I can't always remember the 1/124th because I rarely use it, but it equals to be 1/8 of an inch of a damp round toothpick. And when I say damp, I just mean damp, and you dip it in. I usually mark them off with a Sharpie marker in the measurements, like 1/8, 1/4, 1/2. If you've ever gotten a kit from me, you'll have some already. And now this light one, I haven't added acid to it yet. And people always wonder too, like, when do I add acid? How much do I add? And it's really variable according to the value you're making. So this is light, and I'm not going to add that much acid to it because it doesn't really require it. And a bit to save my pans, I try to go easy on the acid because of course it eats away enamel very quickly, and it eats away at even metal. So I've added 1/32 to this. I'm going to turn the heat up because heat's important for take up of color. Now, when I made this sample from the collection, I added 1 teaspoon of acid to get the water clear to this point. I'll show you, it's not 100% clear because my new Brilliant doesn't like to clear up that much, but I mean, that's pretty close to clear. It's always this way. When we look in our pot and we can see more dye than we can if we pick it up like that. Just because there's an influence of looking down and the sides of the pot reflecting back. So I sometimes will just add a nylon in or any piece of wool, and I'll frequently reuse this many times and get a really interesting non-color, as I like to call it. I might use it over several dye sessions. Nylon really clears up the dye bath quickly. And you could see it wasn't very much dye at all. And then now we have a perfectly clear dye bath. If that's something you want, I prefer to have a clear dye bath and not have it go into the sewer system. Not because it's dangerous, but because why waste it? Why waste it? We can do something with it. When you make these weird things, you know, if you use a piece of wool and do this, you get these wonderful things that you can't get otherwise. And I think that's important for our work. I'm always trying to aim towards and help people make more artistic work. So I'm just going to shuffle over to the side here and let my camera follow me. Now that's that color light. And this is the same color, but multiplied by 4. So you can see it's 4 values darker. See that? I'll shift over here a little bit. Well, maybe it doesn't want to follow me today. So you can see how much darker it is. And of course, the acid adding to this situation is quite different than it is with the light one. And I always am considering how much dye do I have in there. That's what helps me know. So if I use 1 teaspoon for this value, I should probably use 1.5 teaspoons. And it doesn't have to be multiplied. You must think, oh, well, maybe it's like dye and we need to multiply it because it's 4 times as much dye, but we don't need to. We just need 1/2 tablespoon. I don't know if you ever had that measure. So this would be probably the most acid I would ever use when dyeing. So let's turn this back up. I hope it's not too rattly and noisy for you. Now we've made the original formula. We've made a lighter version. Just going to give this a stir while I'm talking about this. And we've made a darker version. This is going to take a while to take up also. Patience is needed and time. And it might not even take up during this show, and that's okay. You'll see a picture of it when I let everyone know who's a subscriber to the Welcome Mat where their new video is, because I record this for the Welcome Mat and people can watch them forever. There's probably 120 or so of these dye shows there for people to be able to resource and look at when they're wanting to dye a certain thing. Because when I'm giving this show, you might not be ready to think about or want to do this, but at least they're there for you when you need a special color or you're looking for something, and everything on the Welcome Mat is searchable. So now we've made it lighter, we've made it darker, let's think about the other two things we might want to do. We might want to make it warmer or cooler. And I'm just going to tell you how to do that because we are short of time. We can't do everything. So if I want to make this formula warmer, I would add yellow to it or orange, and that will warm it up. If I wanted to make it cooler, I would add blue or blue violet to it, and that would cool it off. So that's an easy do. And you might think, how much will I add? And that's a great question. What you want to do is do it in increments. So I might mix up in a half a cup of water, 1/128 of those colors, and add it bit by bit. So I add a quarter of the water in and see the change. And then that sort of gives you a good idea how you can move forward if you wanted it a lot cooler, or that might be what you wanted, or warmer. It works for both. But now I want to talk to you about the mysterious brighter and duller. So here's where the story reading comes in. So we know we have our formula. And now I want to make this formula brighter. So now you might think this is plenty bright already, but it really isn't. Its saturation is only about, saturation runs in percentages. It's only about 70% or even 65. It's really not that bright in the whole brightness scale. So what I want to do is look at my formula. I'll just go over it again. 1/16 of moss green, 1/128 of chocolate brown, and 1/32 of brilliant green. So what can I do to make that brighter? So we know that brown, just like mud, will make things duller. So what would happen if I substituted the chocolate brown for yellow? So let's do that and see the result. And of course, when we're dyeing, it's quite wonderful because we can, if we didn't feel that it was bright enough, we could add more yellow. So in the act of dyeing, during the active part of it, we can change whatever we want to while it's wet. And even if something gets completely processed and you dry it and it's on your shelf, it's still changeable, which I think there's no like it. It's wonderful. That's the best part of dyeing. If I was selling lettuce, I might be, not enjoy it as much because, it has a shelf life, but I don't feel wool does. So now we're going to go back to our formula. It's 1/16 of moss green. And then we have 1/32 of brilliant green. So we're following the recipe with the greens. Make sure I'm getting the right spoon. Sometimes they get nested in each other and I can't find them. So 1/32 of brilliant. And now let's make our change. Let's change the story of this green. Let's make it brighter. I'm choosing to use yellow because of course it's a light color and it really has an impactful change that happens to greens and to blues. But if we used yellow and we were making a warmer color, it wouldn't be so impactful. But make sure I got the right spoon. So I'm using the 130 or 164 spoon and just having it half full. So that seemed like quite a little amount to me. And I think for dramatic effect, I think we should add that again and use 1/64. Just make sure this is mixed up. Everything's dissolved. Now also, I'm going to remember that I have added 1 teaspoon of acid to this. So when I add my wool, I'm going to stir a lot because I want to make sure that there's a lot of water passing through my wool at first because there's so much acid in there. It's not as hot. I'm going to add this little bit of cold water here too. It's not as hot as it was because I turned it down, but this is a time for action again. You really want to stir a lot because that's going to grab on very quickly. And by stirring, you're helping cooling and you're helping the water push through, and the water carries the dye and it helps the dye adhere all the way through. So stirring is really good. You can see it's already taking up pretty quickly. That's because of the presence of acid there, and that's why stirring this is so important. So now I'm gonna let it heat up a little because it looks like it has good absorption. Like I can see a lot of colors in there already. Now, I don't know if you ever think about this, but dyeing can be hard physical work. You know, like I was just stirring here for a couple of minutes or so, and you want to be, I like to be ambidextrous. You just be able to use both hands. And I also wonder sometimes if we shouldn't be doing a bit of conditioning to help ourselves. So here's our light one. Isn't it beautiful? Come over here, put it in the same pan as this original recipe. Here. So this was just the right amount of acid for this because I can see it's made a big difference right away. And I didn't add it back to about value. With the light one, the wool is going to take up the dye very quickly. And so you can kind of judge, is it close to being the value I want or halfway there? And I usually, you know, that color is about a value 3. So I waited till it was value 2 before I added the acid. And with this one, I'm hoping to get about here. And I waited till it was about value here, right? I waited till it was close to the way I wanted it before I added the acid. That really helps you stop from getting white core too. All right, so now we learned how to make it brighter. And it's going to be delicious. I was glad I added that extra bit. That was what was needed. Sometimes we can follow our instinct, and sometimes we can, you know, look and see. Like I might want to add another yellow to that when I compare it to the first one when it's all taken up. Okay, so now we're going to make it dull. So let's read our story again. We already know that our dulling agent from making our brighter one was the chocolate brown in this story. And when you want to figure out what the dulling agent is with your formula, just look at the color wheel. So if something's blue and they're adding orange, you know that that's a dulling agent for blue. So cross the color wheel and it's going to cancel it out. And so that's important for you to remember. Even when I have green, if I added orange, it's going to be dulling, and yellow won't dull because green is close to blue and orange is the opposite color. So just understanding and having a little color wheel you can consult can really help you. So I want to make this quite a bit duller. So I'm going to do the recipe as written. And whenever I want to dull cool colors down even more, I add black. Now, we can have fun with my new dye, Old Stink, but you know, maybe I will. Let me think, what do I want to do? Old Stink is a great color because it can dull down warm or cool colors. And I think I'm going to stick with my plan and add black because not everybody has Old Stink yet. But don't forget, you can just go to wanderworks.ca and get any magic carpet color. All right, get your mind on what you're doing here. I'm talking to myself. 1/16. It just so happens to be a PD day. And I had a lot of phone calls just before this started. 1/16 of Moss. I always like to be in a cone of meditative silence before I start this show. But that wasn't available to me today. So 1/64 of chocolate. Or 1/128. Oh, I doubled it. That's interesting. So when I was writing this out, I decided to double the chocolate because it was 1/128. So I'm going to put 1/64 of chocolate in there. That's interesting. I'm going to double it. Okay. And then 1/128 of black. And after I get this going, we'll have a question period. And I also wanted to tell you some other exciting news I have for you. Now we'll add the last color, which is Brilliant, and it's 1/32 Brilliant. There's a little bit of yellow in here, and I'm just gonna clean it out, I hope. Well, I can always put it in this pan too, get it cleaned up, because that's the one that I added yellow to. I don't want to add yellow to this. So can I talk to you a little bit about cleaning up your dye things? It's really important. Like today when I went to start, just checking my measurements, making sure I'm doing what I wrote. I had my measuring cups here and they looked clean, but I thought, well, because I'm making something light, which is easily influenced by other dyes, I want to make sure that it's clean. And I was shocked about how much sort of residual stuff was in there. So I always recommend that people do a good cleanup either after they dye or before they dye. And I like to use the, I forgot what it's called. Oh, Wanda. I have it in my cupboard and I will get it. I like to use Vim, and I'm sure there's this kind of cleaner everywhere you go. And I like to use it with bleach, just so that I can get my pans clean. I don't ordinarily use bleach too much, but it's really great. So I'll clean everything with that, my spoons, my pans. I clean up my sink afterwards. Just keep everything really top to top shape, because then when you start dyeing the next time, everything's clean. And we want that. Get this in here, and again, also it has acid in it, but not as much as the other one, so I can relax a little bit. So these are subtle changes that I made, but you can make dramatic ones. Like you could say to yourself, oh, I want that to be blue. I kind of like it. I'm going to add, you know, the equal amount of blue as moss green. And you can do that. It's just, every formula is just a starting off place for you. It's good when you first start to play with formulas that you add things that are close to the color on the color wheel. And I want to tell you, all of us probably have formula books for when you first begin to dye. You want somewhere to start and know where you're going. But lots of times those things don't turn out the way they're supposed to anyway. And the other thing that happens is you get stuck in a time warp of what that person liked at that time and what they created. Sometimes it's themed, you know, and you'll end up having colors that are all the same saturation, or end up having colors that are sort of all the same value, because that's the way dyes work. So being able to change things like this is a wonderful thing. So here's our dark one, and it's very handsome. So we could even make that darker, multiply it by 4 again, and have something as akin to black. So I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to turn this up, and I'm going to ask you for your questions now. If someone is sending me a chat message, I can't see them. I'm far away from my camera and I can't control it in any way. So it's not like I'm sitting at my desk and I can just doodly doot. So go ahead and open up your microphone and say whatever it is you need to say. Because I'm here and I want to hear it.
Wanda, can you hear me? It's Alicia.
Yes, Alicia.
Hi, can you show us a close-up of that cleaning product you took out of your cabinet, please? What is it?
I will. It's just called Vim, and I don't know if it's available in every state or if you can get it, but it's like a paste cleaner. It comes out and it's liquid and it's mildly abrasive.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And this one's with bleach, but you can get it without bleach and it really works great. And it cleans up your countertops even without bleach if you get some dye on it. Yeah, does anybody else have any questions about having fun with formulas?
Wanda, I have a question about dyeing in general. It's Jane.
Yeah, I'm going to come close to you because my pots are bubbling and it's very noisy. Go ahead.
Okay. My question is, could you reiterate again, and this is basically for a new dyer, how to avoid white cord?
Yeah.
I know it's a timing and temperature thing.
It actually has strangely to do also with the temperature of your wool that you add to your hot dye bath. So I'm always telling
Okay.
people, if you're doing what I'm doing here, adding wool right to a hot dye bath, because I like to reuse my water over and over again. I try to raise the temperature of my wool close to the temperature of the pot water. That's really important. The other number one cause of it is how people soak their wool. And there's a great, I don't know, I'm probably going to be dead before this gets out there and people are using it as common practice, but people still are using dish soap and thinking they have to soak things overnight. And you do not. It doesn't matter how long you have something in dish soap. It really doesn't have what it needs to make wool wet. Now,
Yes.
shampoo does. Shampoo without conditioner added, some cheap and tawdry shampoo that doesn't cost very much money will wet your wool very well. I like to tell people if they don't want to get Synthropol, because it can be expensive to have it shipped, that they should be getting Jet Dry, because it's the closest thing, the closest product we can get. But make sure it doesn't have bleach in it or baking soda, because that'll affect your dyeing.
Okay, so if you have Centropol and you soaked it, so, and your water is hot, no dye in it, but it's hot, do you wait, put your material in it, wool in it, and wait until the wool gets as hot as the water before you put the dye in?
I always have the dye in the pot before I put the water in. Or before I put the wool in, sorry, sweetheart. I always put the dye in the water, then add the wool.
So do you wait
And-
until the water's really hot before you put the dye in?
Yeah, because
You know-
that's where I dissolve it.
Okay,
I
you
don't
know
put
what
it
I'm
in a little
asking?
container like other people do. I actually dissolve it right in the dye bath.
Okay, and
Because then I can
then
see
you,
it's properly dissolved. That's one of the reasons I like to do that.
and
and-
your wool can go in cold?
It shouldn't be cold. The wool should be the same temperature as the water or close to
Okay,
it.
great,
Yeah.
great. That's what I was confirming. Thank you.
Yeah, and that helps more than anything. And then, you know, you saw me reusing my water, so there was already acid in here. So it's good to keep a careful eye on how acidic your water is and try to remember, you know, is it almost exhausted, or do I have enough acid in here to dye another couple of quarter yards? So each
Mhm.
time we dye something, it gets exhausted. So when we have things, there's too much heat, either in the water comparison to the wool, or vice versa. The wool might be hot and we're putting in a cold dye bath. That can prevent things too.
Okay.
Working very quickly. And then I'm always telling people, mostly people aren't dyeing like me, quarter yard after quarter yard, half yard after half yard, like dyeing 25 yards in a day when I'm dyeing. But you really want to watch your acid levels. So you saw me adding wool to this pot. I stirred a lot. I added cold water. I tried to ameliorate the temperatures so that didn't happen. But I would say the number one culprit for me that I've noticed with people is that they haven't soaked their wool appropriately. And it's not about length of time, because Synthropol takes seconds. Like I could add Synthropol to this dye bath and add a dry piece of wool and it would immediately be wet to dye. So it's not about the length of time we soak it, it's what we soak it with that's important. So I hope that helped, because that is a problem for people.
Yes, thank you.
I just want to ask Wanda, if should you put your wool into hot water, like boiling water, before you put it into hot dye?
Well,
water?
some people like to pour like a boiling kettle over, Alicia. Like they'll boil the water and then pour it over if they're having a lot of trouble. I just, my water heater is kind of high just because of dyeing. And so I can just have hot water in there and be
Oh,
A-okay.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. I think my water is maybe a little hotter than most people want. Yeah. Because it's about dish doing too. I want to have ultra hot water when I'm doing my dishes. So yeah, I'm crazy. So
I have a
thanks-
question about
Yes, Precious.
amount.
Mhm.
You typically say double the amount to go up one value. So today you're quadrupling it. Is that because you wanted to have a bigger difference between?
Yeah, I want to
Yeah.
show really dark, right? So we
Yeah.
all know that if there's just one value between something, it's not particularly devastatingly discernible, you know? Like one value is not much of a change, but I really want people to know that every time you double the dye, it gets one value darker. Every time you divide the dye by 2, it gets one value lighter. And that's really hard for us too. We think it should make a dramatic, like putting 4 times the amount. Boy, that should have been black, but it isn't, right? And it is wonderfully darker. And you can see the great contrast I have here because I have more than 3 values between them. And that's important too for dyeing and applying, right? So that's good. Yeah. Does anybody want to ask me any more questions? Okay, how many people came today?
32 at the max.
Yay, we're getting there.
Yes, and my guild will send out the newsletter with your link to everybody at the end of the month.
Wonderful, that's awesome. I'm glad they can put it online too, but I mean, the link changes from time to time. What people really need to do is join the welcome app so you're getting that information directly from me.
Yes.
Plus, you get to know other great things too that I publish. So I just added acid to this last dull fella. And you can see just by looking in the pot, I hope, what a difference there is between these 2 pots. Like, look how bright this guy is compared to this guy. And that's also good. If I was making a shrub, say, and it was multi-leaved, it would be so good for me to be able to have similar color. It's almost the same. And have this nice bright, this one, it's original, cedar tips. Have this brighter one. Because it's wetter, so it looks a little darker, but when the water comes out, it won't be. You're going to be able to see the picture. And then this guy, who of course also turned a little darker and duller. And he's another creature altogether. So I'm looking forward to showing you these when they're all nice and dry, because of course water changes their effect. And I also wanted to tell you the exciting news I have. I wrote it down on a piece of paper. What I need now, what I really need is somebody to come after me and say, this is where this is where that is. I need a sous chef. So on October 28th, 29th, and 30th, I'm having an in-studio class. So that means at the Wanderosa, we're having a 3-day class. And it's about the artistic exploration of color. So we'll be redying things, we'll be applying things, and we'll be going on this kind of creative and design adventure using color. And all that information is going to be available for you on my website, Wanderworks, hopefully Sunday evening. I'll be putting it out when I send everybody the notice of Sunday's Heart to Heart. And I hope you'll think about coming and joining me. It's a great time of year to be here. The accommodations are less money. And finally, we have good restaurants here where you can get sort of a half decent, interesting meal. So yeah, come on to Wyerton if you feel like it, because we're going to have a lot of fun in that class. So thank you so much for joining me for this dye date. I hope you remember that every formula I give you or that you already have is just the beginning of a story you can tell. It's just the beginning. Have fun playing with and altering formulas. And I hope you'll even take the stretch and start writing your own, because that's when things really start to get wonderfully, personally vibrant in your rubs when you're making up colors. Yes,
Wanda,
love.
it's Marg. One question on the set this on. How much do you use?
So when it depends on how much wool I have in the sink. So if I have, I don't know, like today I had 1.5 yards in the sink. So I probably put in about a teaspoon.
Okay.
I have it in a squirt bottle. I just go, yeah.
Okay.
Because I find
I
that really
haven't used it before. I have some. I haven't used it, and I really would like to use it, but I just wasn't sure the quantity.
You're gonna
So
love it.
if you're doing like a half a yard, you just give it a squirt.
Yeah, I'd say if you're doing a half a yard, you could probably get away with a quarter teaspoon. You'll
Okay.
see a shocking difference because what it does is make water wetter than it is, and it just goes right into the fabric very quickly and beautifully.
Great.
Mhm.
And how long do you,
Yep.
how long do you have to leave it in there?
Seconds.
Okay, that's awesome.
So, you know, like I just said a few minutes ago, if I wanted to, I wouldn't even have to wet my wool. If my water wasn't so hot and I had Synthropol in the water, I could just put a dry piece of wool in there, get it wet, and then add my dye.
Wow.
Or
Okay.
I could also get other interesting effects if I wanted to by having the dye and the Synthropol and the water hot and adding the wool in. Like every time
Okay.
we combine these things, water, dye, heat, and acid, and the time at which we do it, we can change how our wool looks.
Wow. Okay.
It's
That's great.
fantastic. It is
Great.
great.
Thank you
Does
so
anybody-
much.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm glad for that question. Does anybody else have anything they want to ask me? Okay, thank you so much for coming. Now, next week, we're having what I call a rerun because I have an appointment, but otherwise, we'll be back to live in October again. And I don't know which one I'm going to share with you, but it's going to be interesting. And of course, those of you who aren't members yet, it really doesn't cost you anything to be a member. I highly suggest it. You can, I mean, of the welcome mat, you're going to be able to just go to YouTube and you'll always have that link and you'll be able to look at it whenever you want. And just imagine if you could do that with all of these dye shows. Yeah. Now that is an encyclopedia any dyer would like. All right. You guys have a great weekend and I will see you soon. And thank you so much for coming. Oh, enjoy your dyeing, right? Have an
Thank you,
adventure.
Wanda.
Thanks, Wanda.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Wanda.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.